I never intended to remain invisible forever. Standing outside my parents' colonial revival home in Greenwich, Connecticut on a crisp Thanksgiving morning in 2022, I watched frost glisten on the fallen maple leaves and thought about how differently things might have turned out if my family had believed in my potential just once after I returned from Afghanistan. My name is Captain Olivia Reeves, Liv to my squad in the 10th Mountain Division. Poor little Livy to my family who still saw me as the aimless middle child who escaped responsibility by enlisting. Now I'm the chief security architect at Sentinel Dynamics, the fastest-growing defense contractor on the East Coast. But to my family, I'm still the disappointment who wasted her potential in the military and came home damaged goods with nothing to show for it. The holiday lights wrapped around the porch columns blinked indifferently as I remembered last year's Thanksgiving dinner. "Have you tried that Veterans Employment Program down at the community center?" my older sister Charlotte asked, swirling her wine, her MBA from Wharton always somehow front and center. "Dad knows someone in HR at Reynolds Corp who might have an entry-level security position," my mother added helpfully, not realizing Reynolds had just awarded my team at Sentinel a $45 million contract to overhaul their entire global security infrastructure. My father, William Reeves, spent 30 years building Reeves Financial Group into a powerhouse investment firm serving high-net-worth clients across New England. He groomed my older brother William Jr. from birth to take over, while Charlotte became their celebrated marketing director. I was always the puzzle they couldn't solve, too restless for their world of country clubs and client dinners. The rifts only deepened when I enlisted instead of attending Princeton. "The Reeves legacy is built on prestige and connections," my father always declared, nodding at Will and Charlotte with their Ivy League degrees and carefully cultivated client relationships. I chose differently. After graduating with honors in computer science from Penn State, I joined the Army instead of taking a safe corporate job. While my siblings built their LinkedIn profiles, I built security systems that protected forward operating bases from increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks. My first combat deployment was to Bagram Air Base. While others focused on traditional threats, I identified vulnerabilities in our remote drone operations that could have been catastrophic. When I finally completed my service after 8 years and 2 Purple Hearts, my mother cried, "At least now you can start building a real career." She didn't know I already had, so I built my civilian career quietly, strategically. My military credentials opened doors, but I had to prove myself all over again in the corporate world. I started at Sentinel Dynamics as a security consultant, quickly identifying critical flaws in their defense contract proposals. Within 18 months, I was leading my own division, though my family still thought I was between jobs and figuring things out. To them, I was still just Livy, the wayward daughter who played soldier and came back with PTSD and a limp from a roadside IED. They didn't know that playing soldier had given me expertise in threat assessment that civilian contractors desperately needed. They didn't know my little consulting job had turned into a directorship managing a team of 30 former intelligence officers and security specialists. Since no one in my family ever bothered to ask detailed questions about my work, beyond whether it provided stable benefits, the misconception remained intact. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, adjusting the cashmere scarf that covered the scar along my neck. Another souvenir from Afghanistan that made my mother wince. The door swung open to reveal Charlotte, her face lighting up briefly before settling into that familiar wrinkle of concern. "Liv, sweetie, we weren't sure you'd make it." She hugged me quickly, then whispered, "Dad's in a mood. Reynolds Financial is here. Maybe don't bring up your job situation tonight." Inside, the house buzzed with Thanksgiving preparations. The familiar scent of sage and thyme mingled with the cinnamon from Mom's signature apple pie. Crystal decanters of bourbon and scotch gleamed from the bar cart in the living room, where the men had already gathered. Family portraits lined the hallway. Will's graduation from Harvard Business School, Charlotte's wedding at the yacht club, my parents' 30th anniversary party at the plaza. The only photo of me was from high school graduation, my military commissioning. Photo had mysteriously never made it to the wall. The dining room table was already set with grandmother's Wedgwood china and sterling silver flatware, white roses arranged in the center. Charlotte had been in charge of the place cards as usual. I found mine at the far end, wedged between our second cousin Teddy, who still lived in his parents' pool house at 38, and Charlotte's 6-year-old son, Mason. "Livy," my mother, emerged from the kitchen in a tailored dress and pearls, wiping her hands on a monogrammed towel. "Let me look at you." Her eyes performed their usual assessment, noting my simple blazer and slacks, the practical low heels accommodating my still sometimes painful leg. "You look healthy. Have you been sleeping better? Those circles under your eyes are finally fading." Before I could answer, Will strode in with his standard confidence, trailing Dad and 3 men in expensive suits. "The Davidson account is practically in the bag," he was saying, "just waiting on their board's final approval." My father nodded approvingly, his hand clasped firmly on Will's shoulder. When he spotted me, his expression shifted to something between pity and disappointment. "Olivia," he said, his voice softening as if addressing someone fragile. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it, Dad," I replied, accepting his perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "These are the gentlemen from Reynolds Financial," he said, gesturing to the suits. "Tom Reynolds, CEO, his VP of Operations Mark Whitman, and their new head of investment strategy, Peter Coleman." I nodded politely, suppressing a smile. Reynolds Financial had been trying to poach me from Sentinel for months, though they'd been dealing with my professional name, Olivia Reeves, unaware of the connection to my family. Their latest offer had arrived in my inbox just yesterday. A TI 7-figure compensation package to head their new cybersecurity division. "Nice to meet you," I said simply. "Olivia was in the military," my mother interjected quickly, as if providing an explanation for my lack of recognizable achievement. "She's between opportunities right now." Tom Reynolds nodded with the mechanical sympathy of someone acknowledging an unfortunate situation they're grateful not to share. "Always appreciate our veterans' service," he said vaguely. "If you're looking for something entry-level in admin, I'm sure we could—" "Drinks," Charlotte announced, sweeping in with a tray of cocktails, cutting off what would have been yet another condescending offer. As everyone migrated to the living room, I caught snippets of conversation, Will describing the new summer house on Martha's Vineyard, Charlotte discussing Mason's acceptance to the exclusive Brightwood Academy, my father dropping names of clients they'd recently signed. "Livy," my mother called, gesturing me toward the kitchen. "Would you mind checking on the sweet potatoes? Charlotte and I need to finish the seating arrangement for the charity gala next week." I bit back a retort and headed to the kitchen, where the housekeeper Maria was actually handling everything perfectly well. She smiled warmly at me. "Captain," she said quietly, the only person in this house who still acknowledged my rank. Her son was a Marine. We had a mutual respect my family couldn't comprehend. Through the kitchen door, I could hear my father's booming voice. "This security breach at Westover Industries is killing us. 3 clients on their board, all panicking." "About potential liability." I stiffened. Westover Industries had suffered a massive data breach last month that compromised their intellectual property and exposed thousands of employees' personal information. My team at Sentinel had just been contracted to perform the forensic analysis and security rebuild. "If we could just get a meeting with Sentinel Dynamics," my father continued, "this whole nightmare might be contained. Their new security chief, Olivia Reeves, is supposedly a miracle worker." "Good luck with that," Tom Reynolds replied. "Reeves is notoriously selective about clients. We've been trying to recruit them for months." "Well, they'll have to meet with us," Will declared confidently. "We're Reeves Financial, after all." I couldn't help myself. Carrying a dish of perfectly browned sweet potatoes, I stepped back into the dining room. Maybe they're not impressed by the name. The room fell silent. My father's drink paused halfway to his lips. My mother's eyes widened in alarm. Will's jaw clenched. "Olivia," he said sharply, but I didn't stop. "From what I hear, Sentinel doesn't prioritize clients based on prestige. They look at security vulnerabilities, organizational commitment to fixing systemic problems, and whether leadership takes responsibility for failures." Tom Reynolds frowned. "And how would you know that?" "Just what I've heard," I said, placing the sweet potatoes on the table. My father's face darkened. "Olivia, these are serious business matters you know nothing about." Charlotte appeared at my elbow, her smile tight. "Liv, can you help Mom with the cranberry sauce?" In the kitchen, my mother was arranging dinner rolls in a silver basket, her movements precise and familiar. "What was that about?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "Just making conversation," I replied. "About matters that don't concern you," she countered. "Will has been working on the Reynolds account for months. Your father is trying to contain a potentially disastrous situation with Westover." And I was just, "You were just what? Showing off information you read online? Pretending to understand?" "Corporate security?" Her voice softened to that particularly painful blend of pity and exasperation. "Sweetheart, I know you're still finding your footing since coming home, but this is not the time to try impressing people with random facts. These are significant business relationships." The kitchen door swung open as Will entered, his expression thunderous. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "Language," our mother murmured automatically. "Sorry, Mom," he said before turning back to me. "You embarrassed me in front of Reynolds. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to land that account?" I was just, "You've always been reckless," he snapped. "First enlisting when you had a perfectly good acceptance letter from Princeton, then coming back and drifting between whatever odd jobs you've been doing. And now you're undermining family business?" The door creaked again as Charlotte joined the kitchen confrontation, her husband James hovering awkwardly behind her. "Maybe she should go home," Charlotte suggested with manufactured concern. "We don't want to give Dad more stress? The Reynolds account matters more than her feelings." Will didn't hesitate. "She's right. Get your coat, Liv. We don't need a failed soldier spreading misinformation about professional cybersecurity." I looked at them. Will's dismissal, Charlotte's smug superiority, my mother's silent acceptance of their verdict. 4 years of hiding. Everything I'd built since returning from Afghanistan. All for this. "Fine," I said quietly, grabbing my scarf and coat from the mudroom. "But remember this moment. Monday morning's going to be enlightening." James scoffed. "What could you possibly do?" I smiled, thinking of the proposal sitting on my desk at Sentinel, awaiting my signature, OK Reeves, Chief Security Architect, that would determine whether Reeves Financial would be approved as a client after their catastrophic handling of the Westover data breach. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, stepping into the cold autumn air. The next morning, I walked into Sentinel's headquarters before sunrise. Located in an unmarked building in downtown Hartford, our offices occupied 6 floors. Of a former bank building, a fitting home for a company that specialized in protecting assets of all kinds. "Good morning, Captain Reeves," said Marcus, our head of physical security and a former Army Ranger, as he handed me a steaming mug of black coffee. Only 3 people knew Olivia Catherine Reeves, and the mysterious OK Reeves were the same person. My assistant, my second-in-command, and the company's founder, who had recruited me personally after seeing my work in Afghanistan. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most, hit subscribe. Because the next part of this story proves just how powerful quiet competence can be when it finally reveals itself. "The Reeves financial delegation is scheduled for 9 a.m., Marcus said, checking his tablet. "Your father has called twice already, trying to push it earlier." I smiled, settling into my chair in the executive suite. The entire floor was designed to project understated power. bulletproof glass windows overlooking the Hartford skyline, original artwork from combat photographers, soft recessed lighting illuminating walls of security certifications and military commendations, and at the center, my desk made from the steel of decommissioned naval vessels. A quiet testament to the strength that comes from transformation. This was my world, not my parents' kitchen, not their holiday gatherings. Here, no one questioned my understanding of threat assessment or suggested I apply for entry-level positions. How? Many are coming? I asked, reviewing the Reeves financial dossier one final time. 7, Marcus replied. William Reeves Sr., William Jr., and their security consultant Davidson, plus the Reynolds contingent, Tom Reynolds, his VP Mark Whitman, and their head of investment strategy Peter Coleman. He paused. And your sister Charlotte, of course. Charlotte had recently been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, tasked with rehabilitating the firm's image after several security missteps had become public. Another title built more on loyalty than merit. I inhaled deeply, still hearing Will's voice from yesterday. Failed soldier. Marcus understood instantly and nodded. I've updated the security team. Everyone knows the protocol. After serving together in Bagram, Marcus could read me better than my own family. He'd joined Sentinel 6 months after I did, bringing a dozen other veterans with him. Now nearly 60% of our employees were former military, a fact that made me particularly proud. Call Lisa in legal, I said. Tell her to be ready with both versions of the proposal. At 8:45, Marcus's voice returned through the intercom. They've arrived early, as expected. Let them wait 20 minutes, I replied. The Roosevelt conference room, not the executive suite. In that quiet time, I centered myself, reviewing the 2 paths forward I'd prepared. Option 1. A comprehensive security solution for Reeves Financial, priced at market rate, contingent on significant internal restructuring of their security protocols. Option 2. Rejection of their business altogether, with a detailed explanation of why they failed to meet our standards. Which path we'd take depended entirely on how the next hour unfolded. The Roosevelt Room was strategically chosen. It featured displays of our most significant security interventions, with the Westover Industries case prominently featuring our ongoing remediation work. Let them see exactly what they were asking. 4. At precisely 9:20, I watched through the security feed as Marcus led the Reeves delegation into the conference room. My father pacing impatiently, Will checking his watch every 30 seconds, Charlotte examining the room with poorly disguised interest. The Reynolds team looked increasingly uncomfortable. I adjusted my uniform, not my army dress blues, but the Sentinel executive attire, a tailored charcoal suit with our distinctive silver security badge pinned to the lapel. My hair was pulled back in a tight bun, revealing the scar along my neck that I'd hidden yesterday. Today, it was a badge of honor, not something to conceal. At 9:30 exactly, I nodded to Marcus, who opened the conference room door. Mr. Reeves, gentlemen, ma'am, he announced formally. Please welcome OK Reeves, Chief Security Architect of Sentinel Dynamics. I walked in with measured steps, my slight limp evident but unimportant. The room fell silent. My father stood first, extending his hand automatically. Ms. Reeves, thank you for making time for us. We're eager to... His voice died as recognition dawned. Olivia? He whispered, his hand still extended in midair. Will's face contorted in confusion. What is this? Why is my sister here? OK Reeves, Charlotte repeated slowly, eyes widening. Olivia Catherine Reeves. I walked calmly to the head of the table, setting down my portfolio. Gentlemen, Charlotte, please be seated. Tom Reynolds recovered first. Captain Reeves, he said, emphasizing my rank with newfound respect. I believe there's been some miscommunication. No miscommunication, I replied evenly. Just incomplete information. Marcus, please distribute the assessment packages. As the folders hit the table, I watched their worlds begin to unravel. Inside each was a comprehensive security audit of Reeves Financial, conducted covertly through public records, client complaints, and vulnerability testing we'd performed on their publicly accessible systems. The results were damning. As you'll see, I began smoothly, Reeves Financial's security posture is more compromised than anyone at this table realizes. Your client data protection is outdated by industry standards. Your employee access controls have critical vulnerabilities. And your response to the Westover situation demonstrated fundamental misunderstandings of proper incident management. My father's face darkened. How did you get this information? This assessment wasn't authorized. No corporate espionage was required, if that's your concern, I replied. 70% of this analysis was constructed from publicly available information. The remaining 30% came from standard penetration testing that any moderately skilled hacker could perform. I clicked the remote. Graphs and charts illuminated the conference room screen, detailing security gaps, response times, and industry comparisons. Your vulnerability score is 78 out of 100. The industry standard is below 40. Without immediate intervention, you're facing a significant breach within 6 months. Will laughed nervously. This is absurd. Our security team assures us. Your security team is 3 people with basic certifications, I interrupted. None with actual field experience. Against sophisticated modern threats, they're utterly outmatched. Charlotte finally found her voice. So, all this time, when we thought you were struggling, I was building one of the most respected security firms in the defense sector, I completed her thought. While you were pitying my little military stint, I was developing expertise that now protects systems handling billions in assets and classified information. My father slowly removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. Why the deception, Olivia? Why not tell us? The question hung in the air, heavy with years of dismissal and underestimation. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. When I returned from Afghanistan, you suggested I apply for receptionist jobs. When I mentioned cybersecurity, you laughed and said, "Leave that to the experts, dear." Every success I shared was minimized, every achievement recast as finding my way. Eventually, I stopped sharing. The room fell silent again, broken only by the gentle hum of the ventilation system. Tom Reynolds cleared his throat. If I may, we've been trying to recruit OK Reeves, for months. Your work on the Blackwater recovery operation was remarkable. Charlotte frowned. What's Blackwater recovery? A classified operation, I said simply. And the reason for my second Purple Heart. Will shifted uncomfortably. So what happens now? You've made your point, embarrassed us thoroughly. Is this payback for Thanksgiving? I pressed a button, changing the display. Now we make a choice. Option 1. I indicated the screen. Sentinel. Takes on Reeves Financial as a client. Full security overhaul, incident response protocols, staff training. Market rate, no family discount. Contingent on complete restructuring of your current security apparatus. And option 2? My father asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. We decline your business, I said simply, with a detailed explanation to your board about why we can't risk our reputation on a client unwilling to implement fundamental security reforms. This is blackmail, Will snapped. This is business, I corrected. The same business decisions you make every day. Risk assessment, cost-benefit analysis, strategic planning. Charlotte studied me with new eyes. And what would these reforms entail? Smart question. Perhaps there was hope for her after all. Complete overhaul of your digital infrastructure. New security leadership. Actual experts. Not just people with theoretical knowledge. Comprehensive staff training. And most importantly, a cultural shift that prioritizes security as a foundation of client trust, not an afterthought. My father leaned forward. The cost? Approximately 20 million over 3 years, I replied. About 8% of what a major breach would cost you in damages, legal fees, and lost business. The Reynolds team exchanged looks. We support this approach, Tom said firmly. Our involvement with Reeves Financial moving forward depends on significant security improvements. Will started to protest, but my father raised a hand to silence him. For the first time in my adult life, my father looked at me not with disappointment or concern, but with something approaching respect. 20 years ago, he said slowly, I made a decision about the future of this company. I decided Will would lead, Charlotte would manage our image, and you? He hesitated. I didn't know what to do with you. Your restlessness, your questions, your different way of seeing things. I interpreted those as weaknesses. He gestured to the security assessment displayed on the screen. Clearly, I was wrong. The admission hung in the air between us, weightier than any apology. We'll take option 1, he said finally, and consider ourselves fortunate that you're willing to work with us at all. Will started to protest again, but Charlotte placed a warning hand on his arm. There's one more condition, I added. The Sentinel team that handles your account will be led by former military personnel. Veterans with actual combat experience in cybersecurity. People who've faced real threats, not just theoretical ones. People like you, my father said. People I trust, I corrected. This won't be my account. I have other priorities, but you'll be in excellent hands with my team. As they signed the preliminary agreement, Will remained rigid, eyes fixed on the document. Charlotte's gaze kept returning to the wall of commendations behind me, clearly seeing me for the first time. My father lingered after the others began, filing out. Olivia, he started. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, I replied. Just honor the agreement. Make the changes. Protect your clients. He nodded slowly. Your grandfather would have been proud. He always valued people who built things from nothing. I almost smiled at the irony. My grandfather, the founder of the original Reeves investment firm, had been a combat engineer in Korea before returning to start his business. Another veteran whose early struggles had been minimized in family lore. Marcus will show you out, I said, gathering my materials. My father paused at the door. Will you come for Christmas? The question caught me off guard, so mundane after everything that had transpired. I'll think about it, I answered honestly. After they left, I stood at the window, watching them exit the building below. Marcus stepped in quietly, bringing fresh coffee. That went well, he observed. Better than expected, I agreed. Your sister looked like she'd seen a ghost. In a way she had, I replied. The ghost of who they thought I was. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. News of my role at Sentinel remained within a tight circle. Client confidentiality was our hallmark. But within the Reeves family, the revelation ricocheted like shrapnel. Sitting in my corner office, I scrolled through the 7th text from Charlotte in 3 days. Each message more conciliatory than the last, each carefully unanswered on my end. The transition team is ready for the initial security assessment at Reeves Financial, announced Sergeant Diaz, my operations director and former Army intelligence specialist. A decade younger than me, but with the focused intensity of someone who'd seen too much, too soon in Kandahar, Diaz handled our most sensitive client transitions. They're requesting your presence at the kickoff meeting. Denied, I said without looking up from my monitor. Carter will lead this one. Major Carter, James to civilians, ICE to those who served with him, had been my security officer in Afghanistan. His methodical approach to threat assessment had saved our forward base, twice from coordinated attacks. Now he headed our financial sector division, bringing the same precision to protecting investment firms from digital and physical threats. They specifically asked for you, Diaz persisted. William Reeves Sr. made the request personally. I finally looked up. This is exactly why I shouldn't go. No special treatment, no family exceptions. Standard protocol? Diaz nodded, understanding immediately. In our line of work, exceptions created vulnerabilities. I'll inform them you're unavailable due to classified government contracts. Thank you, I said, returning to the actual classified contract on my screen. A Pentagon request for enhanced security around drone navigation systems. The kind of work that would never make headlines but prevented catastrophes. My office phone rang, the private line that bypassed even my assistant. Only 4 people had that number. Reeves, I answered crisply. Captain. The deep voice of General Howard Blackwater, my former commanding officer, and now the liaison between Sentinel and certain government agencies. I hear you've added family to your client roster. I sighed. News travels fast. In certain circles, he agreed. His tone shifted to something more serious. We need to discuss Madison Protocol. In person. Pentagon, tomorrow, 0800. Madison Protocol, our code name for a suspected coordinated attempt by foreign operatives to target financial infrastructure. We'd detected patterns across multiple institutions over the past 6 months. Nothing definitive yet, but the breadcrumbs were forming an unsettling path. I'll be there, I confirmed before hanging up. As I looked back at my screen, an email notification appeared from an address I hadn't seen in years, james.collierdefense.gov. James had been my direct supervisor in Afghanistan, the one who'd recognized my aptitude for security systems and moved me from standard communications to developing our base's cyber defenses. Okay. Need to discuss urgent matter related to Horizon activity. Secure channel only. JC. Horizon was another code name. This one for suspected infiltration of private financial systems by state actors. My throat tightened. If James was reaching out after all this time, something significant was brewing. Before I could respond, Marcus buzzed through the intercom. Your brother is in the lobby, Captain. Unscheduled. I checked the security feed on my secondary monitor. Will stood awkwardly in our minimalist reception area, shifting his weight from foot to foot, examining the wall of military photographs. Our employees in various deployment locations, faces often obscured or blurred due to operational security. Send him up, I decided. Standard visitor protocol. 5 minutes later, Will was escorted into my office by 2 security officers. His eyes widened as he took in the space. The wall of monitors displaying global security alerts, the glass, cases holding military commendations, the framed photographs of me with generals and cabinet secretaries. Quite a setup, he said, attempting nonchalance and failing spectacularly. What do you need, Will? I asked, not offering him a seat. We both recognized the power dynamic had permanently shifted. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit from childhood. The security assessment team arrived this morning. Very thorough. That's the point, I replied, finding vulnerabilities before others exploit them. They're requesting access to executive communications, board meeting minutes, client files. He shifted uncomfortably. Sensitive materials. Also the point, I said. You can't secure what you don't examine. Will hesitated, then lowered his voice despite the soundproofed walls. There are certain files, certain client arrangements that require discretion. I studied my brother carefully. William Reeves, Jr., groomed from birth to lead the family empire, now squirming under the prospect of transparency. Are you telling me there are illegal activities in your client files, Will? No, he protested too quickly. Just gray areas, aggressive tax strategies, creative compliance approaches, exposure of which would damage client relationships and possibly trigger regulatory reviews. I finished for him. He didn't deny it. I leaned back in my chair. This is exactly why you need us, Will. If your creative approaches can be exposed by our team, they can be exposed by hackers, competitors, or regulators. Security isn't just about preventing access, it's about ensuring you don't have indefensible vulnerabilities in the first place. We can't just revamp decades of client strategy overnight, Will argued. Some of these relationships go back to grandfather's time. Then you have a choice to make, I said simply. Continue with practices that create existential risk to the firm if exposed, or use this security overhaul as an opportunity to clean house. Will paced the length of my office, stopping at the window that overlooked the central operations floor. 30 analysts monitoring security systems worldwide, half of them in wheelchair-accessible workstations adapted for combat injuries. You built all this? He asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his defensive posture. With others, I acknowledged. Veterans who couldn't find work that utilized their skills. Intelligence specialists considered too damaged for corporate environments. People who understood threat assessment from experience, not theory. Like you, he said quietly. Like me, I agreed. Will turned back, his expression more open than I'd seen in years. I didn't know, Liv, about any of this. About what you were building. You never asked, I pointed out. None of you did. You decided what my military service meant, without ever understanding what I actually did. He had the grace to look ashamed. We all thought, that I was hiding from failure, I supplied. That I couldn't hack it in the real world. That my limp and occasional nightmares were the sum total of what I brought back from Afghanistan? Will nodded slowly. Dad keeps your security assessment on his desk now. Reads it every morning like religious text. I've never seen him so humbled. I didn't respond. Years of dismissal couldn't be erased by one moment of recognition. Charlotte's beside herself, Will continued. Keep saying she should have known, should have seen it. She's reviewed every conversation you've had in the past 4 years, looking for clues she missed. And you? I asked, curious despite myself. Will considered the question seriously. I'm trying to understand how my little sister became one of the most respected security experts in the country while I was dismissing her as directionless. He paused. And I'm trying to figure out what that says about my judgment in other areas. It was the most self-aware statement I'd ever heard from him. Start by being honest with the assessment team, I advised. Their job isn't to judge your business practices, only to identify security vulnerabilities. What you do with that information is your decision. He nodded, some of his usual confidence returning. I should get back. The team is waiting. He hesitated at the door. Will you be at Mom's birthday next month? I hadn't decided. Part of me wanted to maintain professional distance, keeping family and business separate. Another part recognized an opportunity to redefine these relationships on new terms. Maybe, I said noncommittally. After Will left, I returned to the encrypted email from James Collier, scheduling a secure video conference for that evening. Whatever was happening with Horizon, it was escalating. At 7:30 p.m., long after most of the staff had departed, I sat alone in our secure communications room, waiting for the connection with James. The screens flickered to life, revealing his familiar face, now sporting more gray hair and deeper lines around his eyes than when we'd served together. Captain Reeves, he said formally, though his expression conveyed genuine warmth. Good to see you. Likewise, sir, I replied. What's the situation with Horizon? Always direct, James skipped the pleasantries. We've detected a pattern suggesting targeted infiltration of 16 financial institutions over the past 4 months. Subtle intrusions, dormant malware, exfiltration protocols designed to activate simultaneously. My mind immediately began connecting dots. Coordinated financial system attack? That's our assessment, he confirmed. Targeting firms with specific client profiles, defense contractors, energy companies, infrastructure developers. A chill ran through me. Like a preparation for something larger. Precisely. James leaned closer to the camera. One of the targeted firms is Reeves Financial. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me. My family's firm handled investments for several defense industry executives and energy sector leaders. But the personal connection still landed like a physical blow. How compromised? I asked. Professional. Detachment snapping back into place. Initial infiltration only, as far as we can tell. No data exfiltration yet, but the malware signature matches the other targets. Timeline? Unknown, James admitted. But chatter suggests acceleration. We're bringing together a task force, private sector security experts working alongside government intelligence. Your name topped the recommendation list. I frowned. Because of my connection to Reeves Financial? Because you're the best, James corrected. The family connection is coincidental, though potentially useful for access. I considered the implications. Taking on a government security task force would mean delegating my normal responsibilities at Sentinel. But if Reeves Financial was among the targets, my family's company was at risk regardless of our recent security measures. The infiltration had likely occurred months ago, lying dormant until some predetermined trigger. Send me the briefing package, I decided. I'll review tonight and give you my answer in the morning. James nodded approvingly. That's the OK Reeves I remember, methodical even under pressure. After the call ended, I sat motionless, processing the implications. If foreign operatives were targeting financial systems connected to defense and infrastructure, the potential damage extended far beyond data theft or financial fraud. It suggested preparation for something more strategic, possibly coordinated with physical attacks or infrastructure disruption. And my family's firm, for all its prestige and connections, was just another vulnerability in someone's larger plan. Phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Your father told me everything. Please call when you can. I need to hear your voice. I set the phone aside unanswered. The personal revelations would have to wait. Right now, I needed to focus on the potential threat. Opening my laptop, I began drafting a security protocol that would exceed the standard measures our team was implementing at Reeves Financial. If hostile actors had already established a foothold in their systems, we'd need specialized detection methods to find the dormant malware without triggering its defensive mechanisms. Hours later, as midnight approached, my office phone rang again. The private line. Reeves, I answered, expecting General Blackwater with follow-up questions. Instead, my father's voice filled the line. Olivia. He sounded older than I remembered, weariness evident even in that single word. I just got a call from the Pentagon. Something about a security task force? I straightened in my chair. How did you... Apparently, he interrupted. When your daughter has a high-level security clearance and your company is potentially compromised by foreign actors, someone thinks you should be informed. The bitterness in his voice wasn't directed at me, I realized, but at the situation, at finding himself suddenly dependent on the child he'd underestimated. It's preliminary, I said carefully. An investigation into potential vulnerabilities across multiple financial institutions, including ours, he stated flatly. Yes. The line went silent for so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Finally, he spoke again, his voice subdued. I built this company on trust, Olivia. Client confidentiality, discretion. The idea that we're compromised, that someone has been inside our systems without our knowledge. He didn't finish the thought, but I understood. For a man who prided himself on control and security, the violation was personal. Nothing has been confirmed. Yet, I said, softening my tone slightly. And if there is intrusion, we'll handle it. We. He questioned, a fragile hope in his voice that made him sound suddenly vulnerable. Sentinel, I clarified, maintaining professional boundaries. With the task force, if necessary. Another pause. Your brother showed me your office today, the operation you've built. His voice took on a quality I'd rarely heard directed at me: pride. "It's remarkable, Olivia. Truly." The praise, so long withheld and now freely given, landed awkwardly. Part of me still craved this validation. Another part had moved beyond needing it. "Thank you," I said simply. "I keep asking myself how I missed it," he continued. "How I could have been so blind to your capabilities." It was a question I'd asked myself repeatedly over the years, but hearing it from him directly stripped away my practiced indifference. "You saw what you expected to see?" I answered honestly. "You decided who I was when I chose the military instead of Princeton, and nothing I did afterward could change that perception." "I was wrong," he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. "About so many things." Another call was coming through on my secure line. James Collier again, likely with additional intelligence. "I need to go," I told my father. "Security matter." "Of course," he said quickly. "But Olivia, whatever happens with this investigation, whatever they find in our systems, I'm glad you're the one handling it." As I switched to the secure line, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. The wall between my family life and professional identity had suddenly dissolved. After years of compartmentalization, my two worlds were colliding, and the stakes couldn't be higher. "Reeves," I answered, pushing personal reflections aside and focusing on the crisis at hand. "We've confirmed activation protocols in the malware," James reported without preamble. "All 16 targets, synchronized for 0-hour execution within 72 hours. 3 days. Whatever the attackers had planned, it was happening now." "I'm in," I said decisively. "Task force, full clearance, whatever you need. But I want my team involved. These are the people I trust." "Already approved," James replied. "Pentagon ZO 700 tomorrow. Bring your best people." He paused. "And, Captain, the country needs that strategic mind of yours again." As I hung up, I stared at the wall of commendations and photographs, visual, reminders of challenges overcome, missions completed, lives saved. This would be different, more complex, potentially more devastating if we failed, and infinitely more personal. I pressed the intercom. "Marcus, call in the Alpha team. Full briefing in 30 minutes. And contact Major Carter. I need him to suspend the Reeves financial implementation immediately. Priority override." Then I texted my mother back. "Can't talk now. Security situation. We'll call when resolved." The familiar calm of operational focus settled over me as I prepared for the briefing. This was what I was trained for: crisis response, threat mitigation, protecting vital systems. Only this time, I wasn't protecting anonymous infrastructure or distant bases. I was defending my family legacy alongside national security, proving not just my worth, but the value of every veteran who'd been underestimated upon returning to civilian life. The Pentagon's Cyber Command Center hummed with controlled urgency. Analysts in both military uniforms and civilian attire moved purposefully between workstations, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of monitors tracking potential incursions across global financial networks. The massive display at the front of the room mapped the 16 compromised institutions, red indicators pulsing ominously against the digital landscape. I'd arrived with my core team at 0630, Marcus handling physical security protocols, Diaz coordinating intelligence analysis, Rodriguez overseeing technical response, and Chen managing communications security. All former military with combat experience, all experts in crisis management. We'd formed this rapid response unit at Sentinel specifically for situations like this, though I'd never anticipated it would involve my family's company. "Captain Reeves," General Blackwater acknowledged as we entered the secure briefing room adjacent to the main operations center. "Your team is cleared for Level 4 access. All information stays in this facility until further notice." James Collier nodded from across the table, surrounded by intelligence analysts and representatives from Homeland Security. "We've identified the infiltration vector," he began without preamble. "Custom spear phishing campaign targeting specific executives with access to trading platforms and fund transfer protocols." Rodriguez, our head of technical operations and former Navy cryptologic warfare specialist, leaned forward. "Payload characteristics?" "Multi-stage," answered a young analyst from the NSA. "Initial compromise established persistent access, followed by dormant modules designed to evade standard security sweeps. Final stage delivered approximately 6 weeks ago. Logic bombs set to execute specific functions across all target systems simultaneously." "Functions like what?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. James slid a tablet across the table. "Coordinated liquidation of specific holdings, mass transfer authorizations, and systematic deletion of transaction records. If executed successfully, billions would disappear within minutes, transferred through a series of shell accounts before anyone could react. Creating market chaos while enriching the attackers," I concluded. "Classic destabilization tactic." "With a twist," added General Blackwater. "The targeted holdings are concentrated in defense contractors, energy infrastructure, and transportation systems. The market impact would cascade beyond financial damage." My mind rapidly processed the implications. They're not just after money. They're attempting to create vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure by destabilizing the companies that maintain it. "Precisely," confirmed James. "We're looking at a sophisticated attempt to create multiple simultaneous crises: financial panic, operational disruptions at key facilities, and erosion of public confidence in fundamental systems." I turned to the NSA analyst. "Attribution?" "Multiple indicators point to advanced persistent threat 29, but with unusual characteristics suggesting collaboration between previously distinct threat actors." "Timeline to activation?" asked Diaz, already pulling up deployment scenarios on her tablet. "The trigger appears to be market-based," James explained. "Programmed to execute when the S&P 500 hits a specific threshold, likely during regular trading hours within the next 72 hours based on current trajectories." General Blackwater fixed his gaze on me. "Captain Reeves, your team's task is specifically focused on Reeves Financial. Given your unique access and familiarity with their systems, you'll lead the containment effort there while coordinating with the broader response." I nodded, professional detachment firmly in place despite the churning in my stomach. "Has Reeves Financial been notified of the specific threat?" "Partial briefing only," James replied. "They know there's a credible cybersecurity threat requiring immediate cooperation with a government task force. Details of the larger operation remain classified." "We'll need full system access," I stated. "Executive level, without restrictions." "Already arranged," General Blackwater confirmed. "Your father has authorized complete cooperation." The meeting continued for another hour as we refined the response strategy. Our approach would be methodical: identify the malware without triggering its defensive mechanisms, develop containment protocols, create a synchronized neutralization, plan across all affected institutions, and establish backup systems to maintain critical functions during remediation. By 0800, we were boarding military transport helicopters headed for Reeves Financial's headquarters in Greenwich, Connecticut. The irony wasn't lost on me, returning as a savior to the building where my capabilities had been dismissed for years. "You okay, Captain?" Marcus asked quietly as the helicopter lifted off, the Pentagon shrinking beneath us. "Focus on the mission," I replied, neither confirming nor denying the emotional complexity of the situation. He nodded, understanding perfectly. In combat zones, we'd learned to compartmentalize personal feelings when objectives required absolute clarity. The helicopter touched down on the rooftop landing pad of Reeves Tower at Aero 845. My father stood waiting with Will and 3 members of their executive team, all looking simultaneously concerned and confused at our military precision arrival. "Olivia," my father began as we approached. General Blackwater said, "Security briefing first," I interrupted. "All business. Secure room, executive access only, no electronic devices." Will started to protest but fell silent when he saw the gravity in my expression. 10 minutes later, in the wood-paneled boardroom that had hosted countless million-dollar deals, I laid out the situation in clinical terms. Your systems have been compromised by a sophisticated threat actor with strategic intent. The infiltration occurred approximately 4 months ago through targeted executive phishing campaigns. "Phishing?" repeated Edward Hamilton, the firm's aging chief investment officer. "Impossible. We have training against that sort of thing." Diaz activated a display showing exact replicas of the spear phishing emails. These weren't standard attempts. They were custom-crafted for specific executives, referencing real client matters, upcoming board discussions, and personal details that enhanced credibility. Will paled visibly as he recognized several emails he had personally opened and acted upon. "The attack is part of a coordinated campaign targeting 16 financial institutions simultaneously," I continued. "The malware is designed to execute within the next 72 hours, triggering automated liquidation of specific holdings and unauthorized transfers." "My God," whispered my father. "Client accounts. Primarily those connected to defense, energy, and infrastructure sectors," I confirmed. "The objective appears to be dual purpose: financial theft and market destabilization with national security implications." The room fell silent as the magnitude set in. "What do you need from us?" my father finally asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Complete system access, no restrictions," I replied. "Isolation of critical networks from external connections, full cooperation from your IT staff and executives, and absolute discretion. No communication about this situation to anyone outside this room." "Done," he said without hesitation. For the next 12 hours, we worked methodically through Reeves' financial systems. My team established a secure operations center in what had previously been the executive lounge, transforming the space designed for client cocktails into a military-grade cyber defense hub. Rodriguez led the technical team, delicately probing the network architecture to locate the malware without triggering its defensive protocols. By late afternoon, they had identified the primary payload embedded deep within the trading platform's authorization systems. "It's elegant," Rodriguez admitted, a reluctant admiration in his voice. "Designed to authenticate itself using legitimate credentials, then execute a series of transactions that would appear normal until the cumulative effect became apparent." Diaz coordinated with Pentagon teams handling the other 15 institutions, synchronizing our findings and response strategies. "Similar patterns across all targets," she reported. "The kill switch needs to be simultaneous, or it could trigger contingency protocols." At 2100 hours, I called for a status briefing in our makeshift command center. The day's intensity showed on everyone's faces, my team operating with military precision, the Reeves financial staff struggling to process both the threat to their company and the revelation of exactly what kind of operation I was running. "We've mapped the infiltration completely," reported Chen, our communications security specialist. "Dormant modules in trading platforms, backup systems, and authentication protocols, all designed to activate when the S&P hits 4,050, likely tomorrow given market projections." "Containment strategy?" I asked. "We've developed a 3-phase approach," Rodriguez explained, displaying the technical specifications: isolation, neutralization, and verification. "We'll need to take all trading systems offline for approximately 20 minutes during the neutralization phase." Will frowned from across the room. 20 minutes during trading hours? That's necessary, I cut him off. "Unless you prefer billions in client funds disappearing permanently." He subsided, chastened. My father had remained largely silent throughout the day, watching the operation with a mixture of concern for his company and growing recognition of my capabilities. Now he spoke up. What's the likelihood of success? High. If executed precisely, I answered honestly, but contingent on synchronization with the other targets. If even one institution's response fails, the attackers could adapt and modify their approach. As the briefing concluded, I noticed my father lingering near the door. "A word, Olivia?" he requested quietly. I followed him into his private office, a space I'd entered only a handful of times in my adult life, always as a disappointment to be counseled rather than a professional to be respected. He closed the door and moved to the window overlooking the Connecticut landscape, now dark except for scattered lights. "I've been in this business for 30 years, he said without turning. Built systems, relationships, safeguards, prided myself on protecting our clients' interests. He finally faced me. And I never saw this coming. Never even understood it was possible. I remained silent, recognizing this wasn't a question but a confession. But you did, he continued. You saw these threats years ago, built an entire company around addressing them, while I was suggesting you apply for receptionist positions. His laugh held no humor. The spectacular arrogance of my ignorance is humbling. This isn't about vindication, I said evenly. It's about neutralizing a threat to national security that happens to include your company. I know, he acknowledged, and I'm grateful. But it doesn't erase the fact that I fundamentally misunderstood what you've become, what you built while we were dismissing you. The moment stretched between us, laden with years of misaligned expectations and mutual disappointment. Your team respects you, he observed, not just professionally. The way they respond to your leadership, the trust they place in your decisions, that's something money can't buy. We've been through combat together, I explained simply. Actual life and death situations tend to cut through bureaucratic nonsense and establish real trust. He nodded slowly. I see that now. He gestured toward the command center. I see you now, Olivia. The acknowledgement should have felt more satisfying than it did. Instead, it simply underscored how unnecessary his validation had become to my sense of purpose and identity. Get some rest, I advised. Tomorrow will be demanding for everyone. As I turned to leave, he called my name once more. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Not just for saving the company, but for building something significant on your own terms. I nodded once, accepting the sentiment without needing it, and returned to the operations center where real work awaited. At 0600 the next morning, I reconnected with the Pentagon Task Force via secure video conference. James Collier looked like he hadn't slept, his expression grim as he reported on developments across the other targets. 2 institutions have more extensive compromise than initially assessed, he informed us. We're adjusting the containment, timing to accommodate the additional complexities. New synchronization set for 10:30 hours, assuming market opens as projected. General Blackwater appeared on screen. Captain Reeves, your team's assessment is the most comprehensive we've received. I'm designating you as coordination lead for the neutralization phase. I acknowledged the assignment, understanding its significance. The response to a sophisticated attack against multiple financial institutions, a potential crisis of national security proportions, would be led by a woman whose own family hadn't believed her capable of meaningful contribution just days earlier. As markets prepared to open, tension built in our command center. Diaz monitored communications with the other 15 response teams. Rodriguez finalized the technical counterattack protocols. Chen secured our own communications against potential monitoring. Marcus oversaw physical security, ensuring no unauthorized personnel could disrupt our operations. At precisely 0930, markets opened with strong upward momentum, pushing the S&P closer to the trigger threshold. Analysts projected we had approximately 1 hour before reaching the critical 4,750 mark. All teams in position, Diaz reported at 1,000 hours. Final confirmation protocols initiated. On the main display, status indicators from all 16 targets glowed amber, signaling readiness. In 20 minutes, we would initiate the most coordinated cybersecurity response in financial history. Will entered the operations center, his typical confidence replaced by nervous energy. Clients are starting to notice the system maintenance. Notifications. Several major accounts are demanding explanations. Standard response only, I directed. Scheduled security updates. No elaboration. He nodded, accepting my authority without question. A first in our relationship. At 10:25, the S&P hit 4,745. 5 points from triggering a potentially devastating attack. Final authorization, came General Blackwater's voice through the secure line. Captain Reeves, you have operational control. Execute at your discretion. I surveyed the room once more. My battle-tested team ready for action. The financial executives watching with a mixture of awe and apprehension. My father standing quietly by the door, witnessing his daughter command a national security operation. From his own boardroom. Execute containment protocol, I ordered. Phase 1 initiate. Across 16 financial institutions, systems began controlled shutdowns, isolation procedures activated, and specialized detection protocols launched simultaneously. Within our operation, Rodriguez led the technical team through the precision sequence we'd rehearsed through the night. Malware isolated in primary systems, he reported after 7 minutes. Proceeding to neutralization. On the main display, 15 green indicators confirmed other teams reaching the same milestone. One remained stubbornly amber. First Capital Trust in Chicago, struggling with an unexpected variant of the malware. Chicago team requesting guidance, Diaz relayed. Their containment is encountering adaptive resistance. I moved to the communications station. Patch me through directly. For the next 4 minutes, I guided the Chicago team through an alternative approach based on patterns we'd identified at Reeves Financial. Their indicator finally shifted to green at 10:37. All targets contained, Diaz confirmed. Neutralization, synchronized and proceeding. The next 10 minutes passed with methodical precision as malicious code was systematically identified, isolated, and neutralized across all systems. Rodriguez maintained constant communication with Pentagon cyber specialists, adapting our approach in real time as the malware's defensive mechanisms became apparent. At 10:52, 22 minutes after initiating the response, Rodriguez looked up from his station with the first smile I'd seen in 24 hours. Clean verification across all primary systems. Malware neutralized. The tension in the room broke as Diaz confirmed similar reports from other institutions. All targets reporting successful neutralization. Pentagon confirming independent verification. General Blackwater's voice came through once more. Preliminary success confirmed. Captain Reeves, excellent work. Recovery protocol authorized. As systems carefully reactivated and normal operations resumed, the magnitude of what we'd prevented became clear. An attack that could have destabilized markets, compromised critical infrastructure, and potentially triggered cascading national security crises had been thwarted through coordinated expertise and precise execution. Will approached cautiously as my team began post-operation procedures. So that's it? We're secure now? For this specific threat, yes, I confirmed. But your long-term security overhaul proceeds as planned. This was just the most immediate danger. He nodded, processing the implications. You know, when we were kids, I always thought I'd be the one protecting you. Big brother and all that. He gestured at the operations center, now transitioning from crisis management to documentation and analysis. Turns out it's quite the opposite. It was the most genuine thing he'd said to me in years. My father joined us, addressing me with newfound respect. General Blackwater called, said you're needed back at the Pentagon for debriefing. He held out his hand formally. Thank you, Captain. Reeves! For saving my company and apparently much more. I accepted his handshake, maintaining professional composure despite the personal milestone it represented. The threat was neutralized through coordinated effort. My team deserves the credit. Your team that you built, trained, and led, he corrected. Don't diminish your achievement, Olivia. I've done enough of that for a lifetime. As we prepared to depart, Charlotte arrived, having been summoned by Will once the immediate crisis passed. She took in the transformed executive floor, military-grade equipment where client couches had been, my team efficiently dismantling our temporary command center, the deference with which Reeves executives now treated me. Livy? She questioned, softly, using my childhood nickname, but with none of the condescension that usually accompanied it. What happened here? Will placed a hand on her shoulder. Our little sister just saved everything, and I mean everything. 6 weeks after the neutralized attack, life at Sentinel had returned to a new normal. The Pentagon debriefing had extended into a series of classified intelligence meetings, congressional testimony behind closed doors, and the establishment of a permanent financial sector security task force with Sentinel as lead civilian contractor. My team had performed flawlessly under pressure, earning commendations that would remain forever sealed in classified records, but were celebrated privately within our ranks. Sitting at my desk reviewing the final security implementation report, for Reeves Financial, I found myself appreciating the symmetry. The company that had dismissed my potential was now protected by the systems I'd built, the expertise they'd belittled now central to their continued existence. The board meeting presentation is ready for your review, announced my new assistant, Lieutenant Rivera, another veteran finding her footing in civilian life. And your father called again, 3rd time this week. I nodded, accepting the file, while ignoring the personal message. The professional relationship with Reeves Financial had been formalized through proper channels: quarterly security reviews, staff training protocols, incident response procedures. The personal relationships remained more complicated. Also, invitations arrived for the Veterans Employment Initiative fundraiser, Rivera added. Pentagon leadership will be attending. They've requested you as keynote speaker. This caught my attention. The annual gala supported programs helping veterans transition to civilian careers, precisely the challenge I'd faced upon returning from Afghanistan with invisible skills that corporate America largely failed to recognize. Accept, I decided, and have Marcus coordinate security arrangements. After the thwarted attack, my public profile had risen considerably, despite efforts to keep my role classified. Certain adversaries had ways of identifying who had disrupted their operations. Later that afternoon, as I prepared for a video conference with international security partners, Marcus appeared at my door. His expression told me this wasn't an operational matter. Your sister's downstairs, he announced, says she needs 5 minutes. Charlotte had reached out repeatedly since the incident, texts, calls, emails, each carefully professional yet clearly seeking reconnection. I'd maintained distance, unsure whether her renewed interest stemmed from genuine remorse or merely recognition of my newly evident value. Send her up, I decided, curious enough to break my pattern of avoidance. Charlotte entered my office with none of her usual polished confidence. Her eyes widened as she took in the space. Awards I couldn't explain, photographs with officials she didn't recognize, the wall of monitors tracking global security alerts. This is impressive, she said, clearly searching for adequate words. What do you need, Charlotte? I asked directly, not unkind but unwilling to pretend our relationship hadn't fundamentally changed. She sat carefully in the visitor's chair, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. I'm heading the new client security education program, she began. Teaching our high-net-worth clients about digital hygiene, personal security protocols, threat awareness, all the things we never took seriously enough before. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. I'm not qualified, she admitted bluntly. I've taken the training your team provided, read everything I can find, but I'm still inadequate. Clients deserve better. The admission of inadequacy, from Charlotte, of all people, was striking. My sister had spent her entire life projecting unshakable confidence, securing her position within the family hierarchy through unwavering certainty in her own capabilities. "So find someone qualified," I suggested practically. She met my eyes directly. "That's why I'm here. I need a partner from Sentinel, someone who understands both security and communication, someone who can translate complex threats into actionable guidance for civilians who still think password 123 is sufficient protection." I leaned back, studying her. "There are several qualified trainers on our team. I'll have Rivera coordinate." "I want you," Charlotte interrupted. "Not just because you're the best," she added quickly, "but because I need to fix this. Us." The directness surprised me. Charlotte had always approached family relationships obliquely, managing appearances rather than addressing substance. "There's nothing to fix," I said carefully. "We have different paths, different expertise. Professional cooperation doesn't require personal reconciliation." Charlotte's eyes filled unexpectedly. "Doesn't it, though? I've spent 6 weeks reviewing every conversation we've had since you came home from Afghanistan. Every dismissive comment, every helpful suggestion that completely missed who you actually are." She shook her head. "The magnitude of my misunderstanding is staggering." I remained silent, uncertain how to respond to this uncharacteristic vulnerability. "When I saw what you did, watching you command that operation, seeing Pentagon generals, defer to your expertise, I realized I've never actually known my sister." She leaned forward. "I'd like to, if you'll give me the chance." The sincerity in her voice penetrated defenses I'd carefully constructed over years of family disappointment. "This security education program," I said after a moment, "it's actually important. Most high-net-worth individuals have no concept of their vulnerability footprint." Charlotte nodded eagerly. "Exactly. And after what happened, they're finally willing to listen." "I can't do it personally," I decided. "But Major Carter worked in intelligence education before Afghanistan. He can develop an appropriate curriculum and co-present with you." Relief flooded her expression. "Thank you." "It's a professional recommendation," I clarified, "not a personal reconciliation." "I understand," she said, though her eyes suggested otherwise. As she stood to leave, she hesitated. "Mom's birthday dinner is Sunday. Small gathering, just family." She swallowed visibly. "She asks about you constantly now. Not how you're doing like before, but actual questions about your work, your company." "She's trying, Liv." I didn't immediately respond, and Charlotte didn't push further. She simply placed a handwritten invitation on my desk and left. After she was gone, I turned back to the international security briefing preparations, but found my concentration fragmented by the conversation. For years, I'd operated in separate worlds, military service unknown to my family, civilian success invisible to those who should have celebrated it. The walls between those worlds had collapsed dramatically, leaving me without the compartmentalization that had protected me from family judgment. The following Sunday evening found me standing once again outside my parents' home, this time by choice rather than obligation. The evening was mild for November, dried leaves skittering across the manicured lawn as I approached the familiar door. Will answered, genuine surprise registering before he masked it with a welcoming smile. "You came?" "Apparently," I replied dryly. The house felt different, or perhaps I was seeing it differently. Family photos in the entryway now included a recently added image of me in my Sentinel office, captured by a business magazine that had featured our company in their Security Innovators issue. The formal dining room had been replaced by a casual buffet in the sunroom, lacking the rigid hierarchy of assigned seating that had always positioned me at the far end of the table. My mother approached cautiously, as if afraid sudden movements might cause me to flee. "Olivia?" she said warmly. "Thank you for coming." She gestured to the buffet. I made your favorite, herb-roasted lamb. At least it used to be your favorite. I realize I might be working with outdated information. The self-awareness in this acknowledgement was new. Still accurate, I confirmed, allowing a small smile. Dinner. Conversation flowed with surprising ease. Rather than talking around me or offering unsolicited career advice, my family asked genuine questions about Sentinel, about the veterans I employed, about the security landscape. They listened to my answers with attentive interest, absorbing information rather than waiting for opportunities to redirect the conversation. After dessert, my father invited me to his study, a sacred space previously reserved for business discussions. With Will or important clients, "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a worn leather portfolio from his desk drawer. "Found this while reorganizing some old files." He handed me the portfolio, its surface cracked with age. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings, military commendations, and photographs of a young man in Korean War-era uniform. "Your grandfather," my father explained unnecessarily, "before he founded Reeves Financial." I examined the materials carefully, citations for bravery under fire, engineering awards for innovative field fortifications, letters from commanding officers praising his strategic thinking, an entire military career I'd never known about, carefully preserved yet never discussed. "He never talked about his service," my father said quietly. "Not even to me. Said civilian life required different skills, different measures of success." He met my eyes directly. I think I misunderstood his silence as dismissal, when perhaps it was protection, maybe even pain. The parallel to my own silence about military accomplishments hung unspoken between us. "He would have understood you," my father continued. "In ways I failed to." He gestured to the portfolio. "These belong with someone who appreciates their true value." The gesture, acknowledgement of both my grandfather's service and my own, carried meaning beyond the physical items. Not apology exactly, but recognition of a legacy that ran through our family in ways more complex than the financial empire, that had defined our relationships. "Thank you," I said simply, accepting both the portfolio and the sentiment behind it. As I prepared to leave, my mother pressed a container of leftovers into my hands, a motherly gesture unchanged since childhood. While Will and Charlotte lingered nearby, our new dynamic still finding its equilibrium. "The Veterans Employment Initiative Gala," my father said suddenly. "Your mother and I would like to attend, as supporters," he added quickly, "not to intrude on your professional space." I considered the request, weighing the merging of worlds that had once been carefully separated. "I'll have Rivera send invitations," I decided. "The foundation does important work." The relief in their expressions suggested this small concession carried significance beyond a social event. 3 weeks later, I stood at the podium in the Washington Convention Center ballroom, addressing 500 business leaders, government, officials, and military personnel about the untapped potential of veterans in the civilian workforce. The lights made it difficult to see individual faces in the audience, but I knew my family occupied a table near the front, witnessing this aspect of my life by invitation rather than revelation. The skills that protect our nation in combat zones transfer directly to civilian challenges, I told the gathered crowd. Strategic thinking under pressure, operational excellence with limited resources, leadership tested by real consequences. These are assets any organization should value, yet too often go unrecognized when uniforms are exchanged for business attire. From the podium, I could just make out my father listening intently, my mother wiping away tears, Charlotte and Will attending with genuine interest rather than obligatory support. At Sentinel, we've built a company where military experience isn't something to overcome, but something to leverage. Where the same capabilities that protected forward operating bases now safeguard critical infrastructure and financial systems. Where veterans aren't charity cases but essential assets. I concluded with the announcement of Sentinel's new training, Program, fully funded scholarships for veterans seeking cybersecurity certification, with guaranteed job placement for graduates. The initiative represented both professional strategy and personal mission, creating pathways I had forged alone with difficulty, but could now pave for others. The standing ovation that followed felt like validation, not just of the program, but of the journey, from underestimated middle child to recognized security leader, from family disappointment to professional exemplar. As I rejoined my team at our table, Marcus nodded approvingly while Diaz discreetly wiped away uncharacteristic tears. Later, as the gala transitioned to its less formal reception phase, I found myself surrounded by family and colleagues together, worlds, colliding not in crisis this time but in celebration. Quite a different Thanksgiving season this year, Will observed, champagne flute in hand. Last year we were showing you the door. This year is different, I acknowledged simply. Charlotte joined us, animated from conversations, with Pentagon officials who had recognized her new security education program as a model for client protection. 3 companies have already asked to implement similar training, she reported excitedly. Major Carter is becoming a celebrity in financial circles. My father approached last, having concluded a conversation with General Blackwater that seemed to have left him both humbled and proud. Your general friend tells me you've been offered a formal advisory position with Cyber Command, he said, alongside your role at Sentinel. I nodded, unsurprised the information had traveled. Consulting only. My primary commitment remains with my company. Your company, he repeated, the words carrying appreciation rather than surprise now. That you built while we were telling you to apply for entry-level positions. He shook his head. The spectacular irony of seeing your name on our payroll now. Sentinel's quarterly invoice probably exceeds what we thought you'd earn in a decade. The observation carried no resentment, only rueful acknowledgement of misaligned perceptions now corrected by reality. As the evening concluded, I found myself standing between worlds that had finally merged, my military family of fellow veterans, who had always recognized my capabilities, and my blood family, who were learning to see me clearly perhaps for the first time. The journey from being kicked out of Thanksgiving dinner to becoming the protector of the very legacy that had rejected me wasn't about vindication in the end. It was about recognition. A value that had always been present but gone unseen. Of contribution that took forms outside traditional expectations. Of strength that looked different but proved more essential than anyone had anticipated. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you first, remember that success doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it builds quietly, steadily, proving itself when the moment demands. And when that moment comes, when your unique capabilities suddenly become the exact solution to a critical problem, the satisfaction runs deeper than any "I told you so" ever could. My name is Captain Olivia Reeves. I protected my country in Afghanistan, built a security empire upon returning home, and eventually saved my family's legacy when it mattered most. Not because they finally believed in me, but because I never stopped believing in myself. If you found strength in this journey from rejection to recognition, hit subscribe and join a community that understands the power of quiet competence and the satisfaction of proving your worth through action rather than argument. Because the most powerful validation doesn't come from finally being seen by others. It comes from knowing your own value all along.